Okay. Dr. Tuttle, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Hey, hi. Good to see you. So are we all set?
Yeah, it's right here. Yeah. Dr. Tuttle, we're ready for your talk. We're ready for your talk.
Okay. All right. So just go ahead and start.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for being present here at the Naples Veg Fest. And this is Dr. Will Tuttle. I'm live from Northern California. It's great to see you all there. I can see you, and it looks like a beautiful, warm Florida, Southern Florida day, Southwest Florida. It's one of our favorite places. We'll be actually driving in a few days to Florida. We'll be arriving in early December. We have some lectures on the way. We have some lectures in Los Angeles coming up soon, and then some in Arizona, some in Texas, Alabama, and then we'll be in Florida and at some of the other veg fests that Mike Young is putting on around the state of Florida. In Bonita, there's going to be one coming up later, I think in February. So it's really fantastic, I think, to get together and remember the most important things, which are the inner wisdom that we all can learn to rely on and connect with, that'll help us to live a life of kindness and compassion and respect and radiant health also. So as Mike may have mentioned, I've been a vegan now since 1980, roughly, and that's about over 40 years. And I always say the smartest thing I ever did in my life, besides marrying my wonderful spouse, Madeline, was going vegan, because it really creates a foundation for health on all levels, on all 5 levels. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit. And I also like to take your questions if you have questions. Maybe toward the end, I guess. We'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, I'd like to talk about these 5 levels of health, and to basically start off by emphasizing the most important thing, which is the good news that all of us as human beings have been given a wonderful gift. We've been given the gift of a physical body that does not require any animals to suffer, to get all of the nutrients that we need to thrive and celebrate our lives on this beautiful planet here. So I think that's essential. And I think the other thing, of course, I want to emphasize is that we've all been born into a culture where, from the time we're little infants, we've been compelled by very well-meaning people, our friends and family, parents, teachers, religious leaders, so forth, to eat animal-based foods. So we've been basically wounded, I would say, really. We've been forced to reject the gift, this wonderful gift of a physical body that does not require any toxic animal-based foods to be healthy. And we eat these animal-based foods, meat, dairy products, and eggs, basically. And this is devastating, really, to our physical health, and also to the other 4 dimensions of health, which I think we have to really be aware of, especially now when we're talking about COVID and all of the medical issues that people are having. So I think these issues are more important than ever. So the basic idea is that we have these 5 interconnected levels of health, and they are. I can maybe quickly just show you that, so you can get a sense of it. Here, I'll just share with you these 5 connected levels of health, because I think that's important to kind of just be aware of. So here we go. So we'll just start here. You can kind of see that we have our physical health, which is what we think of when we want to be healthy, right? We have also environmental health, right? We can't be really healthy physically if the water's polluted, the air's polluted, the soil is eroded, and so forth. So our environmental health and physical health are completely interconnected. And the other thing to remember is that if we're unhealthy physically and we're taking drugs for diabetes or obesity or heart disease or cancer or whatever it is, all of those drugs go right into the water and cause more disease to the environment. All the pesticide, herbicide, and fungicide residues in the environment go into us. They go from us back into the environment. So these are interconnected webs of causes and effects here that we're seeing. There's also cultural health. So we want to not only, besides living in a healthy world, we would like to live in a healthy society, right? A society where there's basic freedom and justice and equality, and where we have healthy relationships and so forth. If we don't have that, it's very difficult for us to be healthy. We cannot be healthy, really, if we're living in a sick society. It's a great saying, actually, attributed to J. Krishnamurti. He said, it's not a good idea to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So it's important for us not to be well adjusted, for us to question the official narratives in our society if they undermine our health and the health of everyone and the health of the environment. So those are the three outer types of health. And besides those outer types of health, we have two inner dimensions of health. And the inner dimensions of health are perhaps even more important, because this has to do with our being, right? So we have our psychological health, which is critically important to be aware of. And again, if we don't have psychological health, that's maybe the worst thing of all, because even if we have a healthy physical body, healthy environment, and healthy society, but if we are psychologically unhealthy, if we have severe mental problems and emotional problems and depression and so forth, all of that actually will, of course, affect our physical body too, and affects our society. So everything is interconnected. Finally, perhaps the most important of all is our spiritual health, or ethical health. This is really when everything comes down to. As a human being, we are here on this planet for a purpose, and we have a reason for living. And so if we are disconnected from that, what are we doing here? I think that's the most important thing of all. If we don't have a healthy connection with our spirituality, then we're living a completely pointless life, basically. We don't really know. We're just basically following a cultural program and not connected with the sovereignty and the wisdom and the timeless dimension of consciousness that is our true nature. And so these are all completely interconnected. That's the thing to really understand, is that these are all interconnected. So the more we harm one, the more they're all harmed. The more we help one, the more they're all helped, and the more they're improved. So veganism addresses all five. And so the key thing to remember here is that animal agriculture attacks and erodes all five dimensions of health. It never helps any of them. And so environmentally, the problem with animal agriculture is that it's extremely wasteful of resources. And according to the National Academy of Sciences, it's about 12 to 1, between 12 and 15 to 1. In other words, you can feed about 12 to 15 people on a plant-based diet, on the amount of land and water and resources it would take to feed just one person a standard Western diet. So it's not just twice as much or 3 times as much. We're talking about 12 to 15 times as much pollution and rainforest destruction and ocean destruction and depletion. I mean, it's absolutely insane to grow massive quantities of genetically engineered corn and soy and alfalfa and other crops, and then feed them to these cows and pigs and chickens and factory farmed fishes, and then eat the flesh of these animals or dairy products and eggs, their secretions. And then 90%, basically 85 to 95% of all of the corn and soy and alfalfa is just converted into toxic sewage, toxic nitrous oxide and methane, and just toxic cholesterol and acidifying animal protein, saturated fat, toxins are concentrated. It's just a way of concentrating massive amounts of toxins and destroying ecosystems, destroying forests, rainforests. I just read yesterday that according to biologists who are studying the Amazon, the cutting down of the Amazon rainforest because of animal agriculture, that's the main reason to to grow soybeans, to feed these imprisoned cows and pigs and chickens, and again, factory farm fish eat huge amounts of soy also. And so they're growing these gigantic soy plantations in the Amazon to feed animals. And that cutting down rainforest now at about 4 to 5 acres per second. I mean, this is completely insane. It's unsustainable. And so I was just reading yesterday that they're saying that the Amazon is reaching the tipping point, and within a few years, it could completely collapse, and there will be no forest there anymore. All the trees will die. It needs a certain size to create the ecosystem of the rain. The trees create the rain creates the trees. If you cut down enough trees, pretty soon it just completely collapses and you have a desert or a savanna. It'll be just a big dry savanna like northern Africa. There'll be no more forest at all, and that could absolutely kill humanity, essentially. I mean, the environmental effect of this on the climate and on everything else, we don't even know. It's really serious. So again, animal agriculture is destroying this planet. We're overfishing the oceans, completely strip mining the oceans of fish, soil erosion, water depletion, water pollution, air pollution. The main worst thing by far that we're doing to the earth is animal agriculture. So if there's one thing you do to care about this earth, it would be to move to a plant-based way of eating for ethical reasons, to care about this earth. And I would say while you're at it, please make it organic, plant-based way of eating, because again, pesticide, herbicide, and fungicide residues and chemical fertilizer residues are killing birds, they're killing fish, they're killing insects, and we're seeing the complete collapse of ecosystems because of animal agriculture and the use of toxic chemicals. And don't take drugs. Pharmaceutical drugs go through us and they go right into the ecosystem. So we have to take responsibility for our own health. I have not gone to a drugstore and bought one drug in over 50 years for anything ever. I just think, I take responsibility for my health, and I don't go there. I don't go to a doctor. I don't go to a pharmacy. I take responsibility for my health. My wife is the same way. And I think it's a spiritual practice we can all engage in. Disengage from a very violent, abusive medical system, right? We need to do that. It's completely full of toxins and killing everyone. So we have to disengage from violence towards animals, violence towards ecosystems, violence towards other people. That's what veganism is all about. It's stopping the violence towards ourselves, violence towards our own stomachs and the cells in our body. It's all violence towards animals, violence towards indigenous people. Cutting down rainforests is destroying habitat not only for animals, but for indigenous people and hungry people. So we'll move from environmental health to cultural health again, just quickly. The wastefulness of animal agriculture is the foundation for the war in the world that we're having. It's well understood that food shortages are the driving force behind conflict. And we don't have to have food shortages. We're growing enough food every year to feed at least 12 billion people. We have about 7.8 billion. So there's no reason for us to have hungry people, but we do. We have close to 1 billion of our brothers and sisters who are hungry and starving, because most of the food we're growing, we're feeding to these imprisoned animals, while people starve. So that is injustice, inequality, and violence towards hungry people, creating wars and conflict. Plus, we have whole armies of people who have to stab animals all day, and these workers have the highest rates of injury and among the highest rates of suicide and drug addiction, alcoholism, and spousal abuse. So they are doing work that brings out the worst in them. And they go home after work and do terrible things to themselves and to the people in their families and neighborhoods. So it's webs of violence towards animals, towards ecosystems, towards hungry people, towards workers, towards children, towards future generation. Animal agriculture is nothing but violence that's completely unnecessary. There are no nutrients that we need to do this that are in animal foods that did not get there from plants. All the nutrients, all the amino acids that make up all the proteins are made by plants. All of the vitamins that are in any food came from plants. All of the minerals that are in any food came from plants. All of the essential fatty acids that create all the fats came from plants. All the carbohydrates, there are no carbohydrates actually even in animal-based foods. And that's the main fuel that we're designed to use to get energy, right? And fiber all comes from plants. There's no fiber in animal-based foods. So animal-based foods are toxic. There's no fiber, there's no carbohydrates. Those are the main things we need. There's protein, but it's filled with a lot of toxic fat. The proteins in animal-based foods are not easily assimilated. The proteins are very large molecules, basically much more complex, so that when our body breaks them down to get the amino acids so that we can then construct the proteins that we need, we create over 1 million different proteins from all these different amino acids. There's about 20 amino acids that are like an alphabet that create the different proteins that we need. Animal-based proteins, when we break them down, since they're so large and cumbersome, it creates a lot of acid. So animal-based diets create acid in the body. You don't want to do that. Acid is not healthy. The hospitals are filled with people who are there because of eating animal-based foods that acidify the blood, acidify the tissues, and create liver disease and kidney disease and autoimmune disease and breast, prostate, and colon cancer, and so forth. So, and then the saturated fat and cholesterol are harmful also. So our physical health is again tremendously improved when we move away from animal-based foods, move to plant-based foods, organic plant-based foods, whole foods. I would recommend a whole food, organic plant-based diet. It's really important, I think, to get away from processed foods. Buy vegetables, buy fruits, nuts, grains, and seeds, and make food. It's fun, it's delicious, it's less expensive, and you'll be getting everything that you need to celebrate your life on this beautiful and abundant earth. So that's the key, to understand these interconnections. There's also the psychological health. And this is, like I say, so important, because when we're eating animal-based foods, we're eating a whole constellation of narratives. What's the main story in animal-based foods? Like, I'm sitting at the table as a little kid. We have to remember this, that we're not just eating food, we're eating a story. And this story, this narrative is harmful. It's very harmful to us. What are some of the main ideas? The thing to understand is, anthropologists understand this, that every culture replicates itself from generation to generation through the language and rituals of that society. And the main ritual in any society are meals. When people sit down and eat food, we're not just eating food, we're eating a whole story. And so the basic narrative, one of them is, don't make the connection. Don't think about what you're actually eating. Don't think about the cow in the burger or the milk. Don't think about the pig in the bacon. Don't think about the chicken in the egg or in the breast that you're eating, because we don't want to think about that. It's so miserable and so violent and so toxic. We don't think about that. We say, oh, I'm having bacon, and we don't think about where it came from. If my mother had told me where the bacon came from, I'd be like, no, I don't want to eat that. It's terrible. This poor animal is banging her head against the bars, driven into insanity, pulled out, hung upside down by one leg, stabbed, screaming, bleeding. We're going to eat that? We don't want to even think about it, but we're actually eating terror and fear and pain and despair and anxiety and misery and violence. And it's completely unnecessary. So that's the thing to understand, is that we can begin to make connections. And my PhD in education from the University of California at Berkeley focused on educating intuition in adults. And so one of the things I really studied is intelligence. What is intelligence? And intelligence basically is the capacity to make connections that are relevant. And so if you have the basic ritual in every society is a ritual of not making connections, of just learning essentially with every meal to disconnect and not make the connections, then you basically have a situation where the entire society's intelligence is reduced. We're dumbing down the entire society. We're dumbing down the individuals in the society. So people don't make connections. So they become reliable consumers. So they do whatever they're told. So they believe the media, whatever the authorities say. Of course, we believe that because we can't think critically anymore. All we can do is obey orders. We become the obeyer. I live in the San Francisco obey area. Everybody just obeys. Everybody just does what they're told because we can't think anymore for ourselves. That's what happens with animal-based food. We learn to disconnect, to not cultivate our natural intelligence, to have our natural intelligence eroded. So that's one of the most important things to understand, is that this narrative of disconnectedness is foundational. And it's not only our cognitive intelligence is harmed, but our emotional intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, our relational intelligence are all harmed. We stay shallow. We don't look deeply. We don't feel deeply. We don't care deeply because it's too frightening. There'll be too much cognitive dissonance. No. I'm just eating bacon. I'm just eating a burger. Don't tell me what it is. I don't want to know. We'd rather not know. I mean, that's another form of insanity. Really, it's a deep wound. Pervades our entire society. So when we go vegan, we're healing those wounds. We're healing these basic wounds in our psyche and in our society. Another basic mentality is the mentality of domination and exploitation, right? I mean, the basic idea is that might makes right. Those beings who are stronger and more powerful, that's us. We can dominate and exploit and oppress weaker beings. So how can we ever have a society of justice when every meal we're eating is injustice? How can we have a society of any kind of basic equality when every meal we're eating is based on inequality and the domination of the weak by the strong? And we see this around us. We see that we have about 50 people who have more wealth than the other half of the population. We have such gross injustice. We have these super billionaires who control the media and control the government and control everything. And that's inequality creates slavery for us as human beings. So we have to see this as we enslave animals. If we're going to insist on doing that and force medicating them against their will and stealing their babies and imprisoning them physically and psychologically so that we can eat them, we're going to have the same thing happening to us. This is one of the basic spiritual teachings in the world and all the world religions. As you sow, so shall you reap. It's called the golden rule. Don't do to others what you wouldn't want to have done to yourself. Do to others, give to others what you would like to have for yourself. These are the basic wisdom teachings. And yet with animal agriculture, we act like they don't count. We act like, oh, it doesn't matter. It does matter. And how many of you have a dog at some point, or a cat, or a companion animal of some kind? You know that there's a being in there. There's someone in there, a being looking out of those eyes, and she has feelings and she has interests, and that her interests are to her as important to her as my interests are to me, right? So if somebody was going to come by and say, "Oh, I like how your dog looks pretty tasty. I'll give you $10 a pound. Will that work?" You say, "No, I'm not going to. I don't sell my dog by the pound. We don't sell each other by the pound. We don't sell, but we sell cows and pigs and chickens by the pound." I mean, how gross materialism. See, that's another thing. The basic story in animal agriculture is gross materialism, that there is no spirituality. There isn't anything. Everything is reducible to matter. Nothing else, there is nothing else. So if we have that basic story going on with every meal we're eating of materialism, then we have a society that's deeply wounded, that the whole foundation of sanity has been destroyed, essentially. And we're literally, we don't know who we are or what we're doing. And that's what animal agriculture does. It steals our basic sanity from us. So again, it's very important to understand all these things. And also, there's something I refer to in the World Peace Diet as Sophia. Sophia is the ancient Greek word. It means wisdom. And I think it's very important to understand this, that wisdom is feminine. It's Sophia is a goddess of wisdom. It's internal. It's something that lives inside of us, this inner goddess of wisdom. And it's the wisdom of love and nurturing and protecting life. And so if we have the basic ritual in our society is to destroy Sophia, is to destroy this caring heart, because we can't care and still eat meat, dairy products, and eggs. So is that from the time of little infants, that basic caring is destroyed. And I think this is what we need to understand is that the underlying mentality of animal agriculture erodes the feminine wisdom of caring for the babies, for the children, for each other. And so that's what we see happening. Now, corporations can market products to their children, full of pornography and violence, and we let that happen. We let these pharmaceutical companies harm our children in the food industry to harm our children with toxic foods and drugs and so forth. So if Sophia was operating, that would never be possible. So animal agriculture dumbs down and reduces Sophia, the inner feminine wisdom in all of us, especially in women, but I think in men also. And we see these are the problems that we're seeing, and we see the same thing with our spiritual health. The materialism of our society militates against authentic spirituality. So it's very important, I think, just to see how these things are connected. Then also maybe I'll just do this just quickly to mention that we have a historic perspective that herderism is the core of our society. So we've been herding animals for about 10,000 years. It started in what is today Iraq. And this herding of animals essentially was reducing them to objects that you buy and sell by the pound. And so animals were reduced, number one. And then that led to eventually over thousands of years to a wealthy elite class. They're called the kings nowadays. If you read the ancient texts, like the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Iliad and the Odyssey and the ancient Old Testament books and so forth, you'll see there's always these kings. And they're rich and powerful because they own animals. So animals are reduced to property. Wildlife is reduced to being mere pests. And now we have this wealthy elite class that's lording it over everybody else. That leads eventually to animals as wealth, capital. The old Latin word capita means head, actually. Head is in head of sheep and goats and cows. So we have this creation of an economic political system based on a tiny elite minority owning the means of production of wealth, which were animals. That's capital. So we have basically proto-capitalism arising out of animal agriculture. That led to to war. There had never been war on planet Earth until we had animal agriculture, because animal agriculture is a war against nature and against animals. And it became then a war against other people. And the very first word for war, gavya, ancient Sanskrit word, means literally the desire for more cows. So we had this phenomenon of a rich king who had a lot of livestock seeing another king with a lot of livestock capital and wanting to get that capital for himself to increase capital. And so wars have always been about increasing wealth for the wealthy elite. I think we all know that. And that's how it started with animal agriculture. And that led to slavery, where there had never been slavery until we started enslaving animals. Whatever we do to animals, we eventually do to each other. And so we had slavery. Whoever lost the war became literally the property of the victors. They were impregnated against their will, just like they did the cows and sheep and goats, because the more slaves you had, the more wealth you had. So we have this whole ownership of human beings, ownership of animals, the reduction of all these beings to materialism. Then, of course, that led to the domination of the feminine, because you're looking at these animals and the slaves merely as breeders, and pretty soon women themselves became slaves. And if you just read these ancient texts, women are bought and sold just like cows and sheep and goats. They're no different. They're just slaves, basically owned by men as breeders. So we have the arising of a very violent, warlike, patriarchal society based on animal agriculture, and that's very harmful, of course, to the boys as well. They have to reduce and shut down their natural, kind, caring hearts and become capable of violence towards animals and towards women and towards rival herders. And so we have this whole warring, violent society that's destroying the planet right now. And the beautiful truth is that we have an alternative. I'm not just criticizing something without an alternative. So we have this beautiful alternative, a vegan way of living based on ahimsa. Ahimsa is the ancient Sanskrit word that means non-violence. And so living in a non-violent way, LOWFPB, a local, organic, whole food, plant-based way of eating and living, right? Local is really important because the more we connect and decentralize the systems, the more equality and justice there will be. Organic is critical. We have to stop using these toxic chemicals and spewing them into the air and on the earth and killing insects. Whole foods are important because we can't be eating and causing this, again, the proliferation of toxic preservatives and artificial colors and artificial flavors. All of that is toxic. And a plant-based is the most important thing. A vegan way of living with compassion and kindness for all living beings. Again, there's nothing to be proud of in being a vegan. It's basically just coming home to our own hearts and seeing beings when we see beings rather than seeing objects. So this is the thing. Nobody wants to acknowledge the cow in the room, which is animal agriculture. Diabetes rates have doubled. There are dead zones in the ocean. I'm worried about the next pandemic. The rainforests are disappearing. Why is our society so violent? Global warming is unstoppable. My doctor says I need angioplasty. 800 million people are starving. California is running out of water. One single industry causes so much harm. That's it. And it's all 5 levels. As I was saying, it's the environmental, the cultural, as well as our health, physical health, and also, of course, the inner dimensions, our psychological health and our spiritual health. And so hopefully we'll be able to understand this as a society and move in a healthy direction here. I think that's the key thing. So I'd like to just basically give a little bit of more background, and then maybe I can open it up for your questions. So I think what I'll do here is what we see now. This is a painting by my wonderful wife, Madeline. Some paintings of original of animals that she has done. But I think maybe I'll go back to my regular view. I'll stop the sharing so I can just talk to you directly here. All right, so these are the main ideas, and of course all these things play out for us as individuals, and that's the thing I think to realize, that there are these 2 powers in the world. There's the power of the individual. That's each one of us, right? We look out of our eyes, we can make choices, we can decide, right, how we're going to live, what we're going to eat, who we're going to marry, what kind of work we want to do, and so forth. That's our individual power. But then there's another power. That's the power of the group, the power of society, the power of the community, telling us you can't do this, you have to do that. And so the individuals make up the society, but the society makes up the individuals. And so this is the tension that we're feeling right now very strongly. There's always a tension between the individual and the group. But the power really ultimately is with the individual. And so even though all of us have been wounded by being raised in a society where we've been forced to eat animal foods our entire lives, we as individuals can awaken out of that delusion, and we can become healers. We can heal ourselves and our bodies and our minds and our psyches, and we can begin to heal our community, and we can make a healthier world for our children. So as individuals, we have to take responsibility for healing ourselves and healing our relationships with the people around us, and bringing the wisdom and love and kindness and compassion and caring and health and wellness into our way of living. Only we can do that as individuals. And when we do that, enough of us do that, then the society begins to transform in a positive way. And so this is what's happening right now. Today, you're at a Veg Fest. So that's a community event that's created because of caring people like Mike Young and his wife, Denise, and everyone, all of you who are there are showing that you're caring and that you're awakening and that you're about healing. And so this is beautiful. And this is the exact fundamental, most important thing that our society needs today. More than anything, this is the number one most important thing, to create veg festivals, to bring the vegan message to the world, the message of radical loving kindness, of inclusion, of caring, of health, of taking responsibility for our own lives. It's a message of sovereignty, a message of honoring the sovereignty of individual beings. That's what it is. It's the message of honoring the sovereignty of individual human beings, of individual cow beings, of pig beings, of chicken beings, of rainforest beings, ecosystems, fish beings, and children, and all of us, honoring the sovereignty and allowing us to live our lives in a healthy way. And so this is the most important thing. So maybe I'll just say a couple more things here. I'm not sure if there's any chance to do a question or an answer, but I'll just say in my own life a little bit how this played out here. And I see somebody waving there. Anyway, I was born into the usual situation here. So I know what I'm talking about, in the sense that I was born right into it. I ate a lot of meat, dairy products, and eggs. This was back in the 1950s in Concord, Massachusetts. And I asked my mother when I was about 7 years old, "Mom, the kind of food we're eating, is this what everybody eats in the whole world?" And my mother said, "Yeah, this is pretty much what we're eating. It's pretty much, yes, what everybody eats." And then she left the room, and then she came back and she said, "Well, that's not totally true. There are vegetarians." And I had never heard that word vegetarian in my entire life before. So I was curious. And I said, "So what's a vegetarian?" And she said, "A vegetarian is," and she thought for a minute, and then she said, "Don't worry about it. You're never going to meet one. I've never met one. I don't know where they get their protein, actually." And so in my young mind, I had this idea that vegetarians, first of all, were extremely rare, because my mother, who I thought was very old, had never even met one. And second of all, they must be very miserable people, because they weren't getting enough protein. And I knew already that protein is the most important thing. So I was so glad I wasn't a vegetarian. I thought that must be one of the worst things ever, to be a vegetarian. So basically, I went along and ate a lot of meat, dairy, and eggs. And I had the usual problems that kids have, and my brother and my sister also, earaches and sore throats and runny noses and I had an appendicitis, so I had my appendix taken out. I mean, that's definitely dairy in operation. The dairy industry is basically responsible for filling up the hospitals, I think, more than almost any other factor. Of course, we have meat's not healthy either, and I guess fear fills up the hospitals a lot too. But the basic idea here is, for me anyway, is that I just was eating these foods. I was getting sick, but I was okay. I mean, I got along. Back in those days, I was outside a lot. I was playing. I was getting a lot of exercise and so forth. And when I was about 13 or 14 years old, in the summers, I would go away to a summer camp in Vermont. And the summer camp in Vermont was affiliated with this farm, a little dairy operation. And so I learned how to catch my own chickens, actually how to hold them down with one hand and have my axe in the other hand, cut off their heads, and then let them run around, and then put them through the scalding tank, and then eat the chickens. And so I participated in this. And as a 13-year-old little kid, I didn't like doing it particularly, but I thought, well, it's good. I mean, people, have to eat chickens. And I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt by that time that if we don't eat these animals, we're definitely going to die within 24 hours of a protein deficiency, or of a calcium deficiency if we don't drink the dairy. So I knew God gave us these animals to eat. They don't have a soul. They taste good, and you just have to do it. So I basically went along with that and killed the chickens myself, and thought, a man's got to do it. A man's got to do it. It's kind of a rite of passage. I was getting old enough to kill animals. And then we would kill a cow every year too, which was a much more difficult, because it's a 2,000-pound large animal. So, but we did it. We all would kill a cow together dairy cow, and they die. And then we kill them when they're only about 4 or 5 years old. That's true on any dairy, organic or not. The animals, the cows are killed very young, even though they would live about 25 years. So that was the situation for me. I was doing all this. I went away to college, and right after college, I left home, and I decided to, with my brother, to go on a spiritual pilgrimage, and we decided we would walk all the way to California. So we were walking, and we got as far as Buffalo, and we walked south, and we walked all the way to Alabama. And on the way, we stopped at a hippie commune in Tennessee back in 1975. It was the largest hippie commune in the world back then. And they were all vegetarians. They had about 1,000 people, and they were all vegetarians. And so that was it. I saw the benefits. They were healthy, and I learned about the benefits to hungry people. And so, they were actually vegans. I mean, that was the interesting thing. They said they were vegetarian, but they were actually vegans. No one in 1975 ever even heard of the word vegan. So they said we're vegetarians, but they didn't eat meat or dairy or eggs. And they had about 200 children that were born on the farm, and they were all vegan from birth. So they were thriving. Everybody was thriving. And so that was it. I've never eaten meat in my life since then. And I remember when I met Madeline many years ago, we compared notes, and we both realized that back in 1975 in November in Switzerland, the same month and year, this young Swiss artist also decided to never eat meat again in her life as well. So we had that connection. It was really beautiful. But a few years later, I moved to California, and I learned more about dairy and egg production. So I became a vegan in 1980. And a few years after that, I shaved my head and became a Zen Buddhist monk living in a Zen monastery in South Korea. And I realized for the second time in my life, I was in a community that was vegan, only in this case, they were practicing veganism for 800 years. So this was a Zen Buddhist monastery where there was no meat, no dairy, no eggs, no wool, no silk, no leather, not even killing mosquitoes. It was really based on ahimsa, or nonviolence. So I realized that in a community like this with an ancient tradition, people knew that if we're really serious about being healthy, physically, psychologically, creating a healthy society, attaining spiritual wisdom, you cannot eat animals or animal-based food. So when I came back to this country, I felt like I had these vegan roots that went right into the core of my being. I realized that this is not an option. It's really our true nature. So I think we all have our own story and a way of coming to veganism. But however you do it, the most important thing is to understand these principles and then to live them in your daily lives. So I'm going to stop here. I know it's about time. I think it's about almost 2 o'clock, I think. So go ahead.
Hey, Dr. Tuttle, it's Shannon, Vegan Evan's mom.
Hi.
I did your introduction before you connected.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes, I did.
Hi, there's that Vegan Evan. Hi, Vegan Evan. Good to see you.
So we just wanted to see if anybody had any questions for Dr. Tuttle from the audience here. Okay, we've got one, Dr. Tuttle.
Okay.
Hey, how's it going? My name's John. I wanted to ask you if you could touch on the raw food versus cooked food, in the healing process and the journey in the plant-based nutrition in general.
Okay. All right. That's a great question. Between the difference between raw food and cooked food. Basically, I think that raw food is great, especially for cleansing. And so, like myself, when I first became a vegan, actually a vegetarian, I did a lot of fasting, and I ate a lot of raw foods. I was only about 20. I was in my early, like 22, something like that. And I think it was really helpful. I mean, I recommend that. I think eating a raw diet and fasting and water fasting or juice fasting, you can clean out a lot of toxins because they're basically fruits especially are blood cleansers and blood purifiers, and so are vegetables. So vegetable juices especially. And we go to Hippocrates Health Institute every year, which is a raw food institute in West Palm Beach, and give lectures. And there's a lot of people that go there with
Dr. Tuttle.
cancer, diabetes. Yeah.
Dr. Hippocrates is here today. If you want to say hi to them, they're here as a vendor.
Oh, great. Hi, Hippocrates. We love you. Yeah. So, we see tremendous things happening, there. So I think it's great. I think, raw foods is great. Personally, my sense is that if some healthy cooked foods can be integrated in when we're living our lives. That's what we do. I mean, we eat I would say probably kind of a high raw diet, maybe 2/3, something like that, like breakfast and lunch. Pretty much we don't cook. Dinner very often we'll have some vegetables and grains and for starch. So that's my feeling, because I think the only problem with raw food, I think, really, is that a lot of times people are doing it only for their physical health. And then if it doesn't work, and it can be very challenging because our society thinks it's kind of crazy. A lot of people then their motivation is just for their health, and so if it doesn't work, they go back to eating meat, dairy, and eggs. So I think the most important thing is veganism, which is compassion for animals and kindness, and then eat a healthy diet. I think quite a lot of raw is a good idea, but I think some grains, some cooked vegetables can certainly be part of a healthy way of eating, where you have lots of energy. And so it doesn't have, potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice and millet and quinoa and buckwheat and so forth can be very healthy. But we love growing sprouts. We have a vegetable garden where we grow a lot of our own vegetables. We also have a lot of fruit trees. We grow a lot of our own fruits. We have a food forest where we live here in Northern California. So I think as much as possible to grow your own foods, sprout your own sprouts. It's fun to do, especially nowadays when there may be food shortages. To get more self-sufficient for food, I think, is really important also. So thanks. That's a great question. Hopefully that helped a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Tuttle. Any other questions right now for Dr. Will Tuttle? Oh, Vegan Evan has a question.
I have a question.
Okay. Yes, Vegan Evan.
My question is, what is your favorite fruit?
My favorite fruit. Oh man, that's a hard one. It's like whichever one I'm with at the time. Usually, it's like I really love actually fruits. I think it's good. Berries, I think, are in a sense a little healthier because they're not quite as sweet. But we have trees here where we grow our own fruits, and we have persimmons. I don't know if you can grow persimmons in Florida, but right now we're eating persimmons, Fuyu persimmons and Hachia persimmons, right from our own trees. I'm telling you, they are really good. And so I have to say right now it's persimmons. Yeah.
I love persimmons.
I know. It's like being in heaven. They're really good.
You have
Pears can be really good.
Do you have any mango trees or avocado trees? We have a lot of those down in Florida.
Right. Yeah, actually, what we have here is apple trees, pear trees, plum, peaches, apricots, nectarines. We don't have avocados because it's a little too cold, but we do have oranges, grapefruits, and lemons, and kumquats. And then we have Chinese pears and pomegranates and jujubes and olives and walnuts and almonds. We have all that. Yeah. We have all that in our garden. Yeah.
I have one
And
last
some more.
question.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a star fruit before?
Oh yeah, I love star fruit. Yeah, we've had star fruits. They're delicious. We also have egg fruits, which are good too, but you got to make sure they're really ripe before you eat them.
Evan was telling everybody before we started how the first time he ever tried fresh raw jackfruit, it was when you and your wife brought it in California to my surprise party.
Oh right.
That was my first time having it fresh too.
Yeah, jackfruit is good. And of course, when we were in Southeast Asia, we have durian. And some people say, oh, durian is the very best of the best. And it really is really good. I mean, I love durian, but it does have a funny smell.
I love durian too. All right, anybody else with one last question for Dr. Tuttle today? All right, looks
All
like
right. Well,
we,
thanks, Shannon.
answered
Yeah,
everybody's
all right.
question. Thank you, Dr. Tuttle.
Take
Great to
care.
see you.
Okay. All right. Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.